Welcome to Your Intended Message, the perfect place for leaders and promising professionals who want to convey the intended message for greater success. Every week, we interview experts who can help you communicate more effectively, whether that's one-to-one, one-to-few, or one-to-many. And perhaps the most important conversation, one-to-self. I'm your host, George Torah. My guest today is Denise Brosseau. Here's 3 facts I think you should know about Denise. 1, her mission statement is more women leaders at the top of every organization. 2, she is the author of the bestseller, Ready to be a Thought Leader, and is known as a thought leader about thought leadership. And 3, she is a serial entrepreneur who founded her first company at age 26 and has since co-founded 3 thriving nonprofits and 3 companies, including the one she runs today, Thought Leadership Lab. Denise Brosseau, welcome to Your Intended Message.
Thank you, George. It's great to be here.
Wonderful to be talking with you about thought leadership. We've heard the word thrown about thought leadership. What does it mean, and how would we recognize a thought leader?
Yeah, I think this term has been around for decades, and it does get bandied about in a lot of different forms and formats. And so, here's how I think about it. I think about it as the difference between a leader and a thought leader is a leader is often trying to influence or impact the people that they have a direct connection to. They manage these folks, they work with these folks, they have some sort of a relationship with them. Whereas thought leadership is how do we impact those that we have no connection to? How do we get ideas to spread? So it's this idea that leadership is one to many. Thought leadership is many to many. How do we get people that we influence to pick up those ideas and carry them forward to their communities? It's that ripple in the pond, that creating a movement. That's the real journey of a thought leader. And of course, how does anybody recognize a thought leader? I think it really is, first of all, you don't ever call yourself a thought leader. Someone else has to sort of denote that for you. But the second is that it's really about getting change to happen. It is about getting people to think in a new way and act in a new way. I think if you put those together, that's when you're having the necessary impact. And that's the hard work.
Does sound like tremendous hard work. New ways to think and act suggests that this is about making change.
Absolutely. The people that I work with and the people that I want to help in the world are the change agents who are trying to either make social change, they're working on a social cause, they're working on a business change, a transformation in their industry. So this idea of how do we get something like, everything from design thinking, how do we get that adopted widely? That isn't just one person standing out with their book saying, hey, this is a great idea. This takes a lot of people furthering that idea. You think back to women's right to vote. It was decades, it was thousands and thousands of people adopting new ways of thinking and new ways of acting. So I love this to really kind of go back and study some of that way in which change happened, and when does it happen quickly, and when does it really ponderously, painfully go back 7 steps and forward 1. And I think that's the work that I try to help people with. How do we make that faster? And can you do it in a more systematic way? Can you be more strategic about it? Can you be more thoughtful about it? And can you move more quickly? Because honestly, change takes a long time.
And let me throw that question back at you. How can one move more quickly in terms of thought leadership?
Well, I look back in my own journey. I was more of an accidental thought leader. I was running this trade association that I started for women entrepreneurs, and the focus was women raising venture capital funding for technology and life science companies. And at the time when we started, less than 1% of the money was going to women entrepreneurs. That seemed a little paucity, of funding there. So what can we do? I wanted 51%. So what was my organization's focus was on providing women, the education, the access to the resources, connections with one another. But I also had this opportunity to use my bully pulpit to, really be out putting forward ideas about the necessity for change in access to equity capital. And so that really put me on a fast trajectory to gaining a lot of traction for ideas. And I had no idea what I was doing, right? I did not have a strategy. I didn't have a plan. I had no thinking about how do I build this really in an effective way. And then fast forward, the next organization that I helped start was a first venture capital conference for women entrepreneurs, organization now called Springboard. And we hosted these first 3 venture conferences for women across the United States. I hosted one here in the Bay Area, and we had one in Boston, we had one in DC. And then for the next year, the woman who was in charge of that project had us all sit down for literally a year it took to document the heck out of everything. And we created this sort of guide, this franchise model where we could document every single step of the way. That organization has gone global as a result, right? Now they have the guidebook, they have the blueprint. Here's how your city can host a venture conference for women entrepreneurs. Here's all it takes to really make that an effective strategy for changing the numbers. And that allowed them to go global, whereas my organization never really got to that kind of growth. And I think back that it's really that differential. Can you codify your lessons learned? Can you document the milestones, the steps along the way? Can you create the guidebook? Can you create the blueprint? Can you create the visual framework that people can use and rely on and learn from and build on? And that to me is that's the differential. And that's what I try to help people to figure out is, can they take what they know and what they've proved to be an effective change strategy and document it in ways that others can pick it up and carry it forward?
Now, Denise, I just had an aha moment there while listening to you. And so what I'm hearing is it's one thing to discover something new through innovation or brilliance or luck, and maybe teach that to 1 or 2 or 3 other pupils, but it's a whole different stage to take that and systematize it so that you can now broadcast it to the world.
Yeah. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to create these other people as evangelists, as it were. I mean, use some of this, maybe the religious term of disciples. You want people who are your trainers, who you've trained, to now go out and carry that message and that framework and toolkit to others. So yes, and you might create it in a book. It might be a video series. It might be like we had an actual franchise model manual. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but I do think that's the key. I never knew. I mean, if I had understood that a lot sooner in my career, I would have gone a lot further. And so that's what I'm trying to work with, particularly people who are trying to implement big change, to help them to see, do you have a model? Do you have something that someone else can pick up and learn from? And can you make it visual? Can you make it exciting? Can you make it something? I think back to my first model, my first framework. I was in 4th grade when they brought out the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or the food pyramid. Think about things that we've kind of grown up with and known. Those are often global. And why did that happen? It's because they were in a simple visual toolkit that you could rely on, repeat, remember, and it was all there. Like the steps were designed into the framework. That's the kind of thing that gets people to change the way they do things. It's like, oh yeah, maybe that is something better.
And what I'm hearing, so a thought leader is not necessarily just the creator of a new idea or a champion of a new idea, but an interpreter of a new idea.
I think that's right, George. I think that is the gift that we need to bring, that it isn't so much you should do this in any way, right? It is and it is an interpreter, and it is someone who engages with those evangelists and help them to see how to how to both decipher what's already been done, but also how to put that into a new location, a new company, a new organization, a new community. That translation is also really important. Like you can't always pick something up, and the franchise model of McDonald's doesn't always work, right? Sometimes you need to take a model, as one of my clients did, from one industry and then morph it and change it and apply it to a different industry. It's somewhat about how innovation happens, right? Things get morphed, or sometimes they need to be reinvented altogether. I think to how, like Cirque du Soleil, here was the circus. We all thought we understood what the circus was. And now so you go to your first Cirque du Soleil and your mind is completely blown. Well, it's still the same concept of bringing people under a big tent into a world of magic and creating connection and community and relationships with people in a couple of hour format in something that they've never seen before. But Cirque du Soleil and Ringling Brothers couldn't be more different in some ways, right? Both called the circus. So I think that sometimes it is also about being that interpreter, being that person who can help you to figure out how you might need to reimagine these ideas so that they can apply in a new school, a new setting, a new country for that matter.
Is the head of an organization, the CEO, the president, the chairperson, are they the most logical candidate to be labeled the thought leader of the organization?
Often I think that is true. And even if that isn't true, they need to be bought into the business case for why this matters. If there is no essential understanding and buy-in at the top, it's very, very hard to make progress for anyone else in that organization. So you could be someone who's really great at process and really great at creating all these frameworks and toolkits and whatever. But if there's no support for spreading that forward and getting the voice of that organization out in the marketplace, it is a lot harder work. I always look at, I have this assessment that I do for organizations. And the first question is, does this organization see the value of thought leadership? Does the CEO see themselves as that voice of the organization? And a lot of the times what it comes down to is helping a CEO of any organization understand their role is often different from what they think it is. They think the organization is about making money, employing more people, whatever their belief system is. And what I'm trying to do is broaden that understanding and help them see that their stakeholders need to trust them in order to do business with them, whatever kind of business that is, whether they're products or services, nonprofit or for-profit. It comes down to trust. And one of the best ways to build trust is to put our ideas forward in a thought leadership format, in a constructive, ideas focused way, because if you are willing to take that stand, if you're willing to put your ideas forward, preferably with some research, not just any crazy thing you've come up with, but some research, some discipline around things that you've learned through the building of your organization, that's the kind of organizations we trust. We want to work with, work for, do business with, et cetera. So if I can help people to make that shift, that's when things start to change.
Is there room for more than one thought leader within an organization?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I love is when you start to see organizations really get that, they're absolutely framing their technical lead as in different conversations, influencing different communities than their chief people officer, than their CEO, right? So I think back to this story of the CEO of Salesforce. They had this wonderful conference, Dreamforce. When I first went years ago, it was maybe 500 people. Now, I think the last one had 130,000 people in San Francisco, back when we could all do that in person, right? And as that organization was growing that conference, they were realizing that it can't just be the CEO on the stage all day. It was a 3-day event. There was thousands and thousands of different tracks and things that people wanted to talk about. He could no longer be that face of the organization. So he actually hired a number 2 guy who I know that guy, and they brought him in because he was a well-known thought leader who had trained up other people to be thought leaders. And his job was to work across the organization to identify potential folks who could be those faces of the organization who could bring their own ideas and their own perspectives, but also have the message of the broader Salesforce messages. So that this model of building out thought leaders is a great strategy. Another one is to hire in people. I've certainly seen organizations who hire in people who have a following, who have that skill set of being great thought leaders. And now that halo effect of bringing those people in also helps your organization to grow in that trust and in that respect.
Are there different shades of thought leadership?
I think so. I'm not sure how you mean it. What do you mean by shades?
Well, I'm thinking, are there, is it a rigid model, or are there people who might have some of the characteristics but be stronger in one characteristic than others? So you talked about, sharing ideas, and maybe where I'm going is I'm thinking about, can we have thought leaders in training?
Yeah, I love the thinking about that, the framework of that. I think of thought leadership as a journey. And this is often a lifelong journey, because maybe we become a thought leader in one particular area and then we move on to do other work, and we build up a reputation within that new arena. But all the way along, we do have to put a certain set of tools in our toolkit. I mean, one of those tools on the maybe the more negative side is a thick skin, right? Because you may get arrows coming at you, people who don't agree with you, people who are going to attack you. And right now, some of my clients are afraid sometimes to put their ideas out in a public forum as an article or on social media, because they are afraid of those arrows. So I think one part of that skill building is, okay, and how do I help people to come on board with my ideas? How do I accept it when people disagree with me? And how do I frame a constructive conversation? Those are all things that we need to learn over time. We need to learn how to be better at articulating a couple of clear messages over and over again in a variety of forms. We need to be able to work in varieties of modalities. Like, some of us are really good at writing, some of us are great at speaking, some of us absolutely love that creating a curriculum and writing the book. That not all of us have all of those skills, right? So I do think, first of all, yes, that we get certain areas of expertise, but I also think we can start to put more tools in our toolkit over time as we get more practice and more time to try new things and take those risks.
So one of the tools is having a thick skin, because when you're trying to change the world, there are people who like the world the way it is. Thank you very much.
Yes.
What might be some of the other tools that one needs to collect and hone along the way?
Well, I think that a couple of the most important ones are, can you write? Can you speak clearly? Can you craft a message that is understood and is repeatable? I mean, I've listened to some of the other guests that you've had, and so many of them, like Sam Horn, they're very good at helping you to craft a message that is succinct and clear and concise, but also memorable and repeatable, right? That is a really important skill that somebody needs. And I highly recommend people go back and listen to some of those sessions you've had with her, because I think that is a critical component of a thought leader. I think another one is this ability to do that visual framework. I hire in help for that, because I'm not that good at sort of the literally making it beautiful. I'm very good at distilling what the key elements might be, but there's a whole nother skill set that I probably will never have, which is, how do you make that into a beautiful infographic, or how do you make that into a visual that you could put on a PowerPoint slide and have everybody go, oh, I get it. That's hard. So I think that we can develop those different things over time. And then I think that the last is, can you make yourself understood in a variety of audiences? So I'm really, really comfortable and totally happy with my peeps, which is senior women leaders. Like that group of people, I can talk to all day. That we connect instantly. I know their world. I know what they're going through. I've been in their jobs. I've been in those roles. Now let me go and talk to a group of senior executives, mostly male, in a industry like mining. Now I'm out of my comfort zone. And do I know what their world is? Can I speak to them in their language? Can I be compelling and understood? Not always. And so I think that's it too, that one of the skills we have to build is to push ourselves to go to audiences that may not be so accepting of A, us, or B, our message, and listen and look for the signals that say, oh, this is what they're responding to. This is what they grab onto. Just to go on a tangent for a moment, George, I love this idea of, if you think about a popular movie, if somebody can repeat a few phrases from that movie, it's going to be a hit. Similar to your talk, if you hear people saying back something that you've said in a talk or in some sort of a connection with them in an article that they've read and they're starting to repeat, that's when you're on the right track. People need to be able to pick up the moments that compelled them and be willing to repeat them and say, hey, I heard this great gal, she was so smart, look at what she said. That's a completely different way of doing things. That's the hard work.
Denise, your mission statement is more women leaders at the top of every organization. I'm wondering, is your investment and exploration into thought leadership, is that a way of moving women on the faster track?
No question, George. And it's something I learned in my own journey, that when you have that bully pulpit, when you have that position of leadership, your voice is respected. You have that halo effect of whatever role you're in. Why not utilize that and get that seat at the table in a way that is actually moving forward a different perspective, a different approach, and often bringing new people into the conversation and welcoming new voices and new ideas. So yes, absolutely. To me, this difference between the sort of the story arc of my career is learning the importance of thought leadership and then realizing, oh, if I could just help women understand how to do this, they're going to have massively more impact and influence in their careers. And that's what I want. That's how they're going to get and stay at the top of organizations.
Can a thought leader stop being a thought leader, or are they a thought leader forever? Is it a lifetime award?
I don't know the answer to that. I think in some cases, perhaps, but I do think that there is, what's interesting to me is maybe less that question than it is, how do you change from being a thought leader in one particular arena to being a thought leader in a different, particularly if it's orthogonal to where you were working at first. But yeah, I'm going to reflect a little bit about that, George. I haven't really thought about whether you're sort of, once you're anointed, you're always anointed. I mean, you think back to the people whose ideas we continue to follow, even long after they're gone. If they've left behind the frameworks, if they've left behind the book or the video series or the framework or the model or whatever, then of course we're going to be following them for generations ahead. And to me, that's the pinnacle of success as a thought leader. So perhaps the answer is, if you do it right, then the answer is yes.
Okay. So there is hope for me. I could get this lifetime designation.
Why not?
I saw where you mentioned that thought leadership could be considered career insurance. What does that mean?
Well, when I think about all the different people that I've helped in career transitions over my career, I used to be sort of more of a career coach. I don't really do that work anymore, but so much of it, what I see over and over again is, when we hire somebody, we are looking for someone who has the skills of a thought leader. They have the skills of being able to influence, to be able to have impact with their ideas, to be able to bring people along. So I think of it as career insurance because, first of all, I don't know where to buy career insurance. I've always kind of wanted that. But once you have this skill set, people will not only want to work with you and work for you, but they want you in their organization because you bring this set of skills that can help them get their message out, can help them move forward, whatever change they're bringing about. Now, certainly not always true. If the CEO of that organization wants to be the only thought leader, maybe you're not going to be as welcome. But I would say over time, not only are you as a thought leader in more connection and community with people and having this dialogue about whatever change you're bringing about, but you also have this group of people who, as your friends, fans, and followers, are likely to be kind of leading the way to what you need to be doing next. And the reputation and the risks you've already taken and the community that you've already built, the followers you've already built, can often be the reason why a new organization would want to hire you or work with you.
In hiring, if a company wants to hire people who are thought leaders or have the potential to be thought leaders, what should they look for? Is there a question or two they should ask? Is there an assessment? How did they find out if this person sitting across the desk from me, who I'm thinking of hiring, could actually be a thought leader that contributes to the growth of our organization?
The good news is thought leaders are not usually under the radar, and often a simple Google search will tell you whether this person has really built that following. So, do they have followers on LinkedIn, for example? Do they have their voice out? Do they have a point of view? And this is often how I judge. Do you not just have are you just putting out a bunch of stuff, liking something or smiling about somebody's, that to me is nice to have, but are you instead acting like a thought leader? So thought leaders have a certain set of behaviors that I think we can learn from and we can measure in the marketplace. They're often amplifying the big ideas in their community. They're amplifying the smartest and most creative and most interesting folks in their community. They're bringing forward unseen and unheard voices. So that's one behavior. So being an amplifier. Often they're a convener. They're somebody who's bringing people together around a particular issue or a particular idea or in their particular field, or even those who have the same job role together. So convening is another really important strategy. They are often sharing their microphone. So they are giving the rights and access to their microphone, as it were, their bully pulpit, to others who need that voice. So I think that we can look for people's behaviors. And then finally, they're a spokesperson. They're a spokesperson for some critical idea that they want to get out. So if we're seeing somebody who is an amplifier, a convener, a spokesperson, or a supporter, and or all four, that is the kind of person that has the skills we're looking for, and that's the kind of person that you want. Sometimes you find them on the dais of an important conference, but then you want to look behind and see, is that just a one-shot deal? Do they have something creative and unique that they're bringing to that talk? And have they been willing to shape a point of view, maybe take a few arrows along the way? Then you know that that's somebody who is seasoned and ready for whatever's next.
Now, I heard you say that again about taking arrows. And so it sounds like it's risky to be known as a thought leader because you're going to stand out. And if you stand out, someone's going to want to push you down.
Yeah, I would look at it a little differently than that. I think people will disagree with you. And I think it's not necessarily, I use the term arrows lightly and it encompasses a lot of things. I think the truth is that when you are trying to make change, people will disagree with you. As you said earlier, like they want the world the way it is. It's comfortable for them. There's people who are already at the top in whatever this world is, and they want to stay there. So, but I think that the ability as a thought leader to be able to honor and respect people where they are, to be willing to listen to where people are, and to be also willing to help them open the door to the possibility that the way it is today may not be encompassing everything that's possible, that they helping them to be open to innovation and a new perspective. That is the work. So yes, you will always expect that if you are trying to make change, especially hard change, access to, I think about the access to the right to marry as a gay person in the United States, that transformation happened honestly, it was in a fairly short time. We went from that is never, ever, ever going to happen to the law of the land. It felt like a moment in the aeons of history. And yet, how many people took the arrows at that point, had to have the difficult conversations, had to open people to new perspectives, had to codify a legislation, had to really document and bring forward people to support that change. That is the work. And so you have to expect people are not going to jump on board and go, that's great, let's go do that, right? You have to be willing to do the heavy lifting, which is, okay, this transformation is not going to happen overnight.
If a person is at an early point in their career and they're thinking about how are they going to grow their career, and they think they know the direction they want to go, but they're, because you never really know where your career is going to go, and they want to flirt with this idea of becoming of working in that direction of being a thought leader someday. What might be one or two first steps or easy tests for them to see if it's right for them?
I think the most fun part of this is to figure out, is there a particular arena that matters to you more than any other? And I often call it the Sunday morning without pay test. So here's what I mean by that. Are there things you're involved in that you are willing to get up early on a Sunday morning and do with no pay? Is it, whether you want to be reading? One of my clients, she had a stack of magazines on her bedside table, and she would wake up early to read them about education reform and workforce development. I mean, you would not, there's no money in the world you could pay me to sit there and read that, right? I could care less. But to her, that was the most interesting, that change she wanted to bring about in the world. So what are you reading? Which blogs are you reading? Which articles do you gear yourself towards? If somebody invites you to an event focused on X, why will you always get up and go to that? Or where will you put your check? When you start to watch your behaviors and start to see what it is that you're always reading about, always caring about, talking about when nobody really is listening, often that's where you want to begin. So figuring out what your sort of niche, your cause, what you care about, like what's the movement you want to be a part of. For me, it was always women, and fighting for women as the underdog, giving women more right to the table, seat at the table. Always. That was, if you look back from when I was very young to now, that's always been my journey. And so thinking about that, first figuring out where do you want to play, and then secondly, I think, is to start to understand that because you are in that realm and you are there, whether we will pay attention to you or not, thinking about how can I curate the best information and share it with others. So in other words, you're probably looking at this giant funnel of information. Who's talking about your favorite topic? How can you pick out the 1, 2, 3, 5 things that other people could learn from, to get rid of the chaff and get to the wheat here and help people as that curator? That's something you can do no matter what age you are. And that role can be really important, whether you care about design thinking, whether you care about legalizing marijuana, whether you care about, as one of my clients does, saving the wolves. There's a few things that people need to know on your topic. Can you provide that to them in a newsletter or through social media, doing a short video on TikTok, whatever it is? There's a lot of mediums to play with, but be that curator of that information and consistently provide the best information for people. That is where you begin.
That sounds like a lot of ideas for a person to think about and to start. They're bound to get tired at some point, bound to say, I don't know if I can keep doing this. This is just draining me. Now, do thought leaders go through cycles? Do they get excited and wear themselves out and then rest and start up again? Is that normal?
It's very normal. And it's actually something I ended up putting in my book, because in the final chapter, that this is about rest and renewal practices. And, I'll go to this wonderful quote, Jane Fonda's new book that came out last year. She has this wonderful foreword, and she talks about, I'm going to paraphrase, I won't get it exactly right, but she says something, early in her career, she thought change was a sprint. In the middle of her career, she realized it was a marathon. And now in her 80s, she realizes it's a relay race, and that part of it is passing the baton to the next generation. And so when I think about that, I think often for us, we think of it in the sprint and we're just running, and we're just, everything has to be done tomorrow. And then over time, we realize, okay, this is going to take a while. Going back to my own story, less than 1% of venture capital funding going to women. Do you know what the number was last year?
Tell me.
2.
Oh, wow. That's all?
That's all. And I started this journey 20 plus years ago. So you realize that this is not just a marathon, but like for me, I had to pass that baton to other people. My organizations, both of them continue today with other leadership, because there was only so many years of my life that I could do this, because this work is, I mean, we aren't going to get to 51% till long after I'm dead. So if you think about it, I mean, the highest the number's ever gone is 8%. And that was just a brief moment in time. So if we're back to 2%, you have to be willing to pace yourself, and you have to be clear that the only way you're going to stick to it is, first of all, pick something you care a lot about. Very, very important. You got to have the passion and the heart for it. And secondly, be willing to realize that you're just part of this larger movement. Like, I think about women's access to capital. People have been working on that long before I came about, just giving women access to a bank loan, their own bank account. That was happening long before I woke up to this issue. And the issues of women's access to capital are going to be here long after I'm gone. So you're thinking, I'm part of a big community of people working on this. Who else can I ally with? Who else can I share messages with? And how can I amplify their voices? How can I give them my microphone? And how can we work better together? How can we convene and strategize so that we get the support? Because yes, it is long, it is tiring, and we do burn out. I mean, will absolutely admit that I have burned out at times, and then I get re-energized and think change is possible. Please, I hope it's true. And I'm going to recommit myself to do my part.
If people want to learn more about becoming a thought leader, there's a course on LinkedIn by that name, Becoming a Thought Leader, that would certainly give them more information, more material, and process of how to pursue thought leadership.
Absolutely. And it comes with a bunch of worksheets, and it follows along with my book. So people who like to read or listen to the audio, or they can take the LinkedIn Learning course.
And if people want to find you, Denise, your website is?
thoughtleadershiplab.com.
thoughtleadershiplab.com. And that link will be in the description as well to the podcast. Denise, one final question as we finish here. If there is a person out there that you could talk to who's a potential thought leader, and they're at the stage right now where they're feeling the arrows, what advice would you give them to get past that stage?
First of all, recognize that it is a stage, and that often, much as it's counterintuitive, the fact that you're getting the arrows actually means that you have a chance, because people are paying attention. And when people are paying attention, you have much more opportunity to get them to reconsider what they're thinking. I know that seems a little unusual. So that's the first step. First of all, realize it's a stage. Second of all, realize it's actually a good time to be making change. And third, find some supporters who are on that same journey, who have the same message as you, who are under the same umbrella that you're operating under, and link arms and ally with them, because you are going to need those supporters. You're going to need people backing up your voice and saying, first of all, knock it off to those who are, but secondly, here's why what that person is saying is important. Like, you need someone else mouthing the same words and supporting you in order to get through that.
Positive encouragement. My guest today is Denise Brosseau, telling us that it's not a sprint, it's not a marathon, it is a relay race. If you like what you heard, remember to like, comment, and share this podcast. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you convey your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.